Imagine walking through Boston when a 35-foot-tall wave of molasses comes racing toward you at over 30 miles per hour. It sounds like a cartoon. In 1919, it actually happened. Molasses is the thick syrup left over after people refined sugar. Most people know it for being incredibly slow. It is heavy and very sticky. In the early 1900s, it was more than just a sweetener for cookies. It was a key ingredient for making rum. It was also used to create industrial alcohol. This alcohol was used to make explosives for World War I. Companies needed millions of gallons of it to keep up with the war effort. The United States Industrial Alcohol Company owned a subsidiary called Purity Distilling. They built a massive storage tank in the north end of Boston. The location was right in a crowded neighborhood. The tank sat near the waterfront. This made it easy to move molasses from ships into the tank using pipes. The company wanted to store as much as possible before Prohibition started. They also wanted to profit from the ongoing demand for industrial chemicals. The tank was a monster of a structure. It stood 50 feet tall. It was 90 feet wide. It could hold over 2 million gallons of liquid. It was made of steel plates. These plates were held together by thousands of metal rivets. From the very beginning, the tank was a problem. It was built very quickly. The company did not test it properly with water before filling it with heavy syrup. Residents noticed the tank was leaking almost immediately. Molasses would seep out of the seams and run down the sides. Local children would bring small containers to collect the free syrup. The company knew about these leaks. They did not fix the structure. They simply painted the tank brown. This was done to make the leaks harder for the public to see. People living nearby heard strange metallic groaning noises coming from the tank at night. The company ignored every warning. The 15th of January 1919 was an unusually warm day for a Boston winter. The temperature rose from 0 degrees to over 40 degrees in a very short time. This caused the molasses inside the tank to expand. The old syrup at the bottom was cold, and the new syrup on top was warm. This created a lot of internal pressure. The thin steel walls reached their breaking point at 12:40 p.m. Witnesses heard a sound like a machine gun firing. These were the steel rivets, snapping and flying through the air like bullets. Then a massive roar shook the ground. The tank literally exploded. A wave of molasses burst out into the streets. It was 35 feet tall at the start. It moved at 35 miles per hour. This is faster than most people can run. The wave was not like a wave of water. It was a thick and heavy wall of liquid. It carried huge chunks of jagged steel from the tank. These pieces acted like giant blades as they swept through the neighborhood. The force of the wave was incredible. It knocked an entire fire station off its foundation. It crushed wooden houses into splinters. It even knocked a train off its elevated tracks. The air smelled sickly sweet, and the ground was covered in a deep brown flood. Escaping the molasses was nearly impossible. When the syrup hit the cold air, it began to thicken. It acted like quicksand. The more people struggled, the deeper they sank into the goo. Horses were trapped in the streets and could not move their legs. People were buried under debris and heavy syrup. Sailors from the USS Nantucket were the first to arrive to help. They jumped into the sticky mess to pull survivors out. Doctors and nurses set up a makeshift hospital in a nearby building. They had to use saws to cut through the hardened molasses and debris to reach people. The cleanup was a total nightmare. The company tried to avoid blame for the disaster. They claimed that anarchists had bombed the tank. They said it was an act of terrorism. The victims and their families sued the company. The legal battle lasted for 6 years. It was one of the first major class action lawsuits in the history of Massachusetts. Investigators looked closely at the steel from the tank. They found it was only half as thick as it should have been to hold that much weight. The man in charge of construction was not an engineer. He could not even read a technical blueprint. The court eventually ruled that the company was negligent. They had to pay $628,000 in damages. This was a huge amount of money in the 1920s. The disaster killed 21 people. Over 150 people were injured. Many of the victims died from suffocation because the molasses filled their lungs. Others died from the physical impact of the heavy steel plates. The cleanup took many months. Hundreds of workers used fire hoses to spray millions of gallons of salt water into the streets. They used sand to soak up the remaining syrup. The water in Boston Harbor stayed brown for an entire season. People tracked the sticky mess into their homes and onto the city subways. For a long time, everything in the city felt tacky to the touch. This event changed the world of construction and engineering. Massachusetts passed new laws for building safety because of this flood. People say you can still smell the sweet scent of molasses on hot summer days in the North End. The neighborhood has changed a lot since then, but the memory of the flood remains as a warning. It is one of the strangest and most avoidable disasters in history. It was a literal sticky situation.